Hey folks, this is my reading wrap up for July. Now I know that this is late, halfway through the next month, but it's here. It's still happening. I'm still doing it. It doesn't really matter. These are the books I read in July. I started off with Eleanor Jones is Not a Murderer. I received an arc of this book. It's actually due to be released in September. This was a 3-star book for me. Eleanor Jones is very much one of those I'm not like the other girls characters, which is made especially clear in the first 18 pages of the book. About 2 pages in this section are actually part of the story, while the rest is filled with these are my opinions entirely irrelevant to the plot, many of which are very standard opinions, but written as if the character truly believes they're edgy. For most of the book, there's also this apparent need to mention that Eleanor has moved around a lot on roughly every second page, though it does start to become more spaced out as the book progresses. Yes, Eleanor, the readers know you've moved around and been to a lot of different schools. We don't need to be reminded constantly. Really. We get it. This is definitely one of those YA mysteries for people who want to read a mystery that isn't a mystery. It's been compared to Holly Jackson and Karen M. McManus, aiming advertisement towards fans of their books, but I highly disagree. I'm a fan of both of these authors, and I definitely don't think it should be compared to either. Holly Jackson and Karen M. McManus write YA mystery thrillers, including various themes in the books and lots of clever little secrets to uncover. The same cannot be said for this. Eleanor Jones is Not a Murderer is not comparable to these because it's not a clever mystery. Every answer we need to uncover is given away as soon as it comes up, and the only part that remains a mystery is why Eleanor ignores every hint or suggestion that's right in front of her. There are a few pages of big reveal moments where the group of characters figure everything out, but none of it is exciting or revealing because we already knew it all. I also had an issue with the way everyone congratulates Eleanor at the end, saying things like, "Good job, you're so smart, you figured it out," etc., because she literally didn't figure anything out. Everything was either figured out by another person in the friend group, told to her directly, or her realizing it when it's finally right in her face and the only way she can't see it is to close her eyes. A few miscellaneous notes I had on this are the characters are all pretty likable. Eleanor might be the least likable character, actually. There's a moment where she's looking at someone across the car park and thinks, his eyelashes are so long, with supervision that apparently only works in this exact moment, I guess. Oh look, a mysterious bad boy everyone is either afraid of or in love with, and everyone thinks he's sus. And he rides a motorbike. Alfie is very autistic coded and possibly my favorite character in the whole book. Everything he does is perfect. 5 stars for Alfie. The next book I read was By the Time You Read This, I'll Be Dead by Julie Ann Peters. This was a 2-star for me. If there's ever been a book I'd advise strongly against reading, it's this one. I'm not going to say too much about anything specific, but please don't read this unless you're in a good headspace to do so. It's a lot. I first wanted to read this book several years ago, but only recently managed to find a copy, and I'm incredibly glad it took this long and I was able to be in a place where it was safe for me to read it. This book needs content warnings etched into the cover and in bright red across several of the pages inside. Note that there are none in the actual book, but here's what I picked up. Extreme content warning for suicide, strong content warnings for fat phobia, self-harm, and sexual assault, content warnings for ableism, homophobia, bullying, body image, and cancer, and then that first one again several times over. The book follows Daylin, a suicidal teen who finds herself on an online forum for others feeling the same way. One thing I did really like about this book was the format. Instead of being set up as chapters, it has each day with just a few small snippets of what happened on each day, who she interacted with, and what happened during those interactions, flashbacks, and what she's done on the forum that day. I think this book definitely had an interesting idea and could have been done well, but the way it was written included some graphic descriptions and information that could put people at risk on a very serious level. Then we have The Homing by Campbell Black and Jeffrey Kane. This was a 3-star read for me. I've never read a book that's made me feel neutral the entire way through before. I don't mean that in a bad way, just so we're clear. It was rarely so interesting that it pulled me to keep reading, but also just interesting enough that I still wanted to know where it was headed. This book follows George Kenner on a trip to visit his daughter in the strange small town she abruptly moved to 2 years earlier. She'd been working on a research project and had begun to look into ESP when she suddenly stopped, discarded all her notes, and married a local schoolteacher. George hasn't seen Catherine since she moved, and their conversations had grown distant, leading him to believe something was off. But when he goes to visit her, things prove to be far worse than he'd thought. This is an older book, a thriller I inherited from my dad's shelf, filled with peculiar dreams, suspicious characters, unusual deaths and disappearances, cover-ups, and a recurring sense of deja vu. I'm not sure what I was expecting, but I certainly wasn't expecting the twist in this one. Then we have If I Was Your Girl by Meredith Russo. This was a 4-star read for me. This is a mostly wholesome book about a trans girl in high school who recently moved to live with her dad after being attacked in her old town. The book follows Amanda in the current day, overcoming her past and trauma, living as her true self, embracing who she is, and discovering new friendships. It also contains flashback chapters to before she moved, some when she was a child and some taking place before and after a suicide attempt. Despite being 17, Amanda is on HRT and has had gender-affirming surgery. Meredith stated in the author's note that it was written this way to make Amanda's experience as unchallenging as possible and to ensure the readers had no barriers to understanding Amanda as a teenage girl with a different medical history. This was a really beautiful book to read, and it was really nice to see a trans character just living and getting to be as true to herself as she could be. Being a trans teen is hard, but this book brings a lot of joy, love, and acceptance into the experience. So there was the line, "The sky was slate grey and pregnant with the threat of another in a week of thunderstorms," which raised a lot of questions. Next, I read Love and Lost by Kian Nodine. Starting with a letter from the author, you can already tell this is going to be a raw and emotional experience. Kian isn't just sharing a few poems, he is opening up his soul and laying it bare and visible on the table in front of us. Right from the start, this collection had me invested. The plan had been to sit down and read a couple and then go back to the task I was supposed to be doing, but it did not work out like that. Kian's words and writing gripped me from the first line, not allowing for the slightest diversion of my attention. Also, if you do read this, see if you can pick up on the connection between the first and last poems. It's very clever. Strength and 20 were favourites, not isolated, but I really liked those two. Airplane Mode had me bowling. The one time I took a break was after this poem. I had to. A Little Spot of Poetry by Lisa Ride. If you're looking for some poetry that ranges from belly-shakingly funny to gut-wrenchingly heartbreaking, this is definitely worth the read. Lisa is an ex-police officer, she served in the Army Reserve, and she performed in dog shows. What a life she has lived. The poetry in this book details many of these experiences and more. Each poem is preceded by a short explanation or autobiographical piece, giving further context to the poem itself and more of an insight into the meaning behind it and Lisa's life. It's also filled with some of the most gorgeous illustrations you would only expect to see in a children's picture book of a Dalmatian getting into all sorts of mischief. It's absolutely beautiful. I also read Changelings, an autistic trans anthology edited by Ryan Vale and Ocean Briley. I received a digital arc of this book to review, so since it was a digital copy, I don't have a physical one to show you, so here is a little picture. This is an upcoming collection of 13 short stories by authors who are both trans and autistic. The stories mostly feature characters who are trans and autistic, showing how the overlap of these things affects them. I was really excited to read this and was honestly a little disappointed, but I'm still glad I read it and was able to experience some of the work included. This book was hard for me to read for a couple of reasons. I find digital reading to be quite difficult, and it tends to take me twice as long to read something digital. Short stories are also something I struggle with. On top of these personal struggles, the copy I received was riddled with errors, so I was constantly having to reread sentences or paragraphs to make sense of them and stopping to take down notes. Because of this, I did struggle to connect with the work as well as I might have had it been properly edited prior to being sent out. I wrote this review despite these struggles and did my best to navigate my thoughts separately to these issues. I rated the collection overall 3 out of 5 stars, but I did break down my review to individual stories for a more accurate review. The door. This was one of my favorites. A door has mysteriously appeared in the character's bedroom, but it's locked and they can't find a key to open it. This story starts off strong and intriguing and runs with that intrigue the whole way through. I was invested. I needed to know what was happening. Vanishing Names. This one was spooky and sweet. A babysitter is hired to look after a kid they used to watch, but there's something different about her. She doesn't seem to get along with anyone else. She'd rather be outside, in the water and climbing trees, talking to snakes. Fate Turns the Light On. This was a fun little sci-fi piece featuring a school in space and spaceships. There's an attack on the school, and Dax has to fight through sensory overload from the alarms going off and the feeling of his new binder while trying to defend the school he's called home for the past 5 years. A Chrysalis for the Emperor. This was definitely another favourite for me. I absolutely loved it. The bug analogy was very cool and clever, using differences and features typically attributed to insects to show this character's differences with being trans and autistic. Don't Play With My Heart. The main character has board games for a special interest, so he's thrilled to get a job in a game cafe. There's a wide variety of games for people to come in and play while they drink hot drinks. And then an artist starts coming in, sitting to draw at the same time every time. One day, accompanied by his friend, the artist invites our main character, Skylar, to a game night. Skylar is a trans guy. This is a good reminder that trans people don't necessarily have to change their name to something that stereotypically aligns with their gender. Society doesn't get to decide who you are based on a combination of letters and sounds. Only you do. The Doll in the Ripped Universe. This story is beautiful. It's short and sweet and filled with feelings. The main character meets his future self through a crack in time in his aunt's yard. On Belonging. A secret boarding school for magical beings that you can only get to through a portal? Heck yeah. Eli is excited to go to the same school his dad had gone to, until he gets through the portal and finds himself immediately overwhelmed by the crowds and the noise. He just wants to go home, but maybe the right friends will make everything worth it and allow him to find ways to manage the things he finds difficult. Those That Came First. This story felt out of place. When slipped in with the rest of the book, this one doesn't feel like it belongs. It feels less like a short story and more like a snippet from a novel we don't have context for. While there is a slight explanation in the author's note, it still feels off. Those That Came First follows Bailey and his mentor, the Riftmaster, as they explore an abandoned city. Mizmor LeDavid. This one contains a lot of very specific Jewish references you might need to look up to fully understand the story, but it was definitely a fun read. The main character really just wants to look after the sheep and read. The main character's dad has died, and they'd promised to marry Ezra, but now Ezra has found someone else with the same name. Ezra's new partner invites the main character to their wedding. She seems lovely, but something is off about her. The Ghost on Oxford Street. This one has Neo pronoun rep. Excuse me, this was so cute, and suddenly I was bowling. Soul-crushing, gut-wrenching, uplifting, just beautiful. Time traveling and learning about Australia's history with pride and the AIDS crisis. Hyacinths and Other Purple Plants. Two very different characters, both autistic, discovering friendship and learning about each other's special interests. This was very sweet and I really enjoyed reading this one too. I think this was a very important story because it shows that not every autistic person is the same. There are different struggles, different ways of experiencing things, and different understandings. There's a misconception that autistic people have a type, but in reality there are so many variations. Who were you? What are you? I expected more from this, honestly. I haven't read Andrew Joseph White's books yet, waiting desperately for Hell Followed With Us to be released in Australia later this month, but I've seen the hype they get. Given how much people love his books, I went into this expecting something brilliant, life-shattering, crawling into my soul, but it wasn't that great. Following a main character who recently came out as trans, got outed for cheating on his boyfriend, and is now recovering from a violent attack from his ex on a trip to Dogset for, who I'm assuming is his grandmother, with his ex-boyfriend's best friend, who he'd been cheating with. Wandering Stars. Set in a future heavily affected by a climate disaster, Asta is out walking their dog when they find a seal. Asta, who has always wanted to study zoology, knows seals are thought to be extinct and contacts a friend for help. I really liked the concept for this one. It's always interesting to see what people do with a climate-affected future. That's it. That's what I read in July. Have you read any of these books? Would you like to? What did you read in July? Thanks for watching, happy reading, and I'll see you next time. Stay awesome.